And if these walls could talk, they'd rather sing. There's music here tonight, music here tonight. The lights are on at the cafe. There's music here tonight, music here tonight. The lights are on at the cafe.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Stay Home Sessions. We're so glad that you are tuning in. We have a very special theatrical performance, which is the first on the Stay Home Sessions. Theater is something that is very much a part of our roots here at Caffè Lena, so it's so nice to be bringing it back here, even while we're all at home. Tonight we have a great performance featuring Vivian Nesbitt and John Dillon. They will be performing Mother Jones in Heaven, which is a very powerful musical by Si Kahn. And we really hope you guys enjoy it. Please donate to our tip link and enjoy the show. And without any further ado, Mother Jones in Heaven.
Lift up your eyes, lift up your voice, come to the great reunion. Give us your hand, join in our band. You are the you in union. Well, goddamn, I'm in heaven, singing along with the heavenly choir of angels, and we're singing union songs. How the hell did this ever happen? Some non-union switchman on that railway to heaven everyone's always singing about must have gotten his signals mixed up mighty bad. Probably drinking on the job. Boss looking the other way because that damn scab was slipping him $5 every payday. Well, you can imagine my shock. The minute I realized where I'd been sent, standing at the pearly gates I was. I said to St. Peter, you've got to do something about this. There's been a terrible mistake. I can't be stuck up here for eternity without any of my friends to talk to. No, Mother, he said. He called me Mother, just like all my boys do. We don't make mistakes up here like you do back down on earth. Up here we've got pretty good divine judgment all in all. Now, he says, who would you like to see first? That's what most people want to do, see their loved ones again the minute they get here. I'll see my loved ones soon enough. Right now, I want to see John D. Rockefeller. I've got a thing or two to say to him about that Ludlow massacre he ordered where so many women and children were murdered by the gun thugs and the National Guard. St. Peter folds his arms across his chest, looks me straight in the eye. I see he's telling me the truth. John D. Not here. That's when it hits me. I'm not in hell, where every sold-out prosecutor and political pimp in West Virginia said I was going. I am in Heaven. Oh, it's not at all like what they tell you about in Sunday school. No, there's no wings or robes. You get to wear the clothes that you wore back down on earth, the ones you're comfortable in. They do wash and iron them for you every day, which you do get used to. It's a nice heavenly touch. Well, just look at this place. Our Lord did say, I go to prepare a place for you, but who knew this was what he meant? All this time I've been living and working down on earth. He's been up here building me this beautiful Irish pub. Now that's just for when I get thirsty, of course. Wait till you see the beautiful home that he's built for me just on the other side of that cloud. Well, No surprise our Lord was able to do that. I mean, his old man was a carpenter, you know, when he wasn't wandering the countryside looking for a cheap hotel. You know, the kid would have picked up a thing or two along the way. That musician, not only is he the best-looking man I've laid eyes on since I met George Jones so many years ago, he's in the Musicians' Union. Oh, I love heaven, huh? Oh. You know, here's the most amazing thing. This pub is identical to Blackjack Kehoe's Tavern in Gerardville, up in the heart of the Pennsylvania anthracite fields, where I used to spend so much time. Oh, I like a good drink as much as anyone. I'm willing to walk a long way to get one if I have to. Oh, it's like that time I was in prison. It was in West Virginia. It was up in Pratt, the nearest town to the mines up on Paint Creek, where my boys were out on strike. Well, it wasn't exactly a prison. It was a boarding house run by a woman named Isabel Carney. But surely in that boarding house I was a prisoner, sentenced by the damn judge, well, at the governor's request, of course, under armed guard night and day. Unfortunately, they don't serve beer in prison, at least not in any of the prisons I've ever been in. So after a couple of weeks had gone by, I had developed a powerful thirst. Well, the evening guard, he was a middle-aged fellow, about like you, good-looking too. Oh, he liked me a lot, if you know what I mean, even though I was about 20 years older than he was. Well, he came from a long line of Union miners, so he knew all about Mother Jones. Now, one night, after Mrs. Carney had gone to sleep, me and the guard, we slipped out together, like we walked 2 miles from Pratt to Hanford, found a bar, sat down, drank the place near half dry, and then walked back again, just like that. In those days, labor leaders were radicals. That's because they came from the rank and the file, up from the mine, out of the mill, off the slaughterhouse floor. They served their union and their fellow members for a couple of years, and then they went back to the shop, to whatever workplace they had come from. They took up their pick and shovel, their peg and all, their boning knives and their wrenches, and they went back to work. Blackjack Kehoe was that kind of labor leader. He was the head of the Sons of Molly Maguire, a secret organization of Irish coal miners in Pennsylvania back in the 1870s. There was a real man. Not like the so-called labor leaders that we've got in the unions today. King of the Mollies, they called him. Now, if you and I had been drinking together the night of June 20th, 1877, you'd know what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Oh, this place looks a lot like Jack's Tavern. Only here, ooh, they won't let you spit tobacco juice on the floor. Oh, well, in Jack's establishment, the floor was just sawdust on top of tamped clay, and whatever spilt beer and tobacco juice didn't soak in overnight, you just swept up and out the next morning, or the next afternoon, however long it took the bartender to wake up and get sober. Yeah, but Jack wouldn't have been there to pour our drinks. No, he was sitting in prison, staring at the wall, counting the months till the hangman. The jury, if you could dignify that paid-off gang of political pimps and low-life informers by that name, had convicted him of murdering a mine foreman. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. Down in the darkness, down at the breaker, close on the midnight hour, steadily working, quietly leaving, trailing a thin line of powder. Little Schuylkill Valley town is all lit up tonight by flames that lick like tongues from the breaker fire. The tight-lipped coal and iron police won't get much sleep tonight, looking for the sons of Molly Maguire. Down at the tavern, banded together, strong men are hiding their sorrow. Over at Pottsville, there at the prison, 6 men are hanging tomorrow. I only tried to organize the men I've worked among. I'm hanging in the morning, will you miss me? And Monday early, so they say, the mines will open back, and the coal and iron police are drinking whiskey. Down in the darkness, standing together, 6 men are lying on the gallows, holding a red rose, waiting for sunrise. King of the Mollies, Jack Keogh. The trap is sprung and Molly's sons are traveling into time, murdered by the men who hope to hang her. But the unborn souls of Union men are all with her tonight, and the Pennsylvania pits are dark with anger. Pennsylvania's Day of the Rope. It was in the headlines of every newspaper in America. You better believe I read every word of those stories. Everyone in the country was talking about it. Greedy rich people and honest workers alike. 6 men were hanged at Pottsville, 4 at Mauchunk. Every one of them died, denying any guilt. Alexander Campbell, just before he was led to the scaffold, left his muddy handprint on his cell wall to stay there for eternity as proof of his innocence. They've tried for 50 years to scrub it out, but it is there to this day. Every man who went to the scaffold in those days and in the days to come was an Irishman. Whatever crime they were arrested for, what they were really tried and convicted of was being secret members of the Molly Maguires. Well, goddamn right they were secret members. No one in their right mind would come out and say he was a member of an underground organization that blew up mines, assassinated mine foremen, beat, shot, and stabbed strike breakers, and dumped their bodies down abandoned mine shafts. No, you would have to be crazy to say that out loud. Just to be suspected of being a Molly Maguire was an open invitation to the coal company gun thugs to ambush you, beat you near half to death, and then they'd probably just slit your throat to teach you a lesson. It was just like that when I was organizing for the miners' union back in those same anthracite fields. Now suppose a miner was walking down the road and he gets stopped by a coal and iron police roadblock, a machine gun pointed straight at his chest. Now they will ask if he's a union member, maybe even if he's a Molly Maguire. Well, if he says yes, oh, he is just a goddamn fool. They probably shot him anyway, Pennsylvania being what it was in those days. But the Molly Maguires, they didn't start out in Pennsylvania. No, they started out in Ireland, at the time of the land clearances. The hard men, hired by the Protestant lord of the manor, the same kind of lowlifes that came over here and became members of the coal and iron police, would go to a Catholic tenant family's hut in the middle of the night. First thing, they would set the thatched roof on fire. And as those terrified family raced out to escape the flames, they would beat them to within an inch of their lives if they didn't murder them outright. Then they would tear down the mud walls of the hut and drive that poor family off of the Lord's land, out of the county, and sometimes all the way to the Pennsylvania hard coal fields. Oh, it didn't take long for the Catholics to begin to fight back. Young Catholic men would blacken their faces and dress up in women's clothing and give back as good as their neighbors and kinfolk were getting. Every time a manor house burned, whenever a Protestant lord or a land agent was found dead by the side of the road, the whisper went about that it was the sons of Molly Maguire that had done the deed. Well, some say she was a young widow who vowed revenge after being driven from her home. The young men who claimed her as their leader said that she had a fearsome, warlike appearance that struck fear into the hearts of any land agent, British lord, or gun thug unlucky enough to come across her path. Oh, they said she always wore red petticoats, so even under cover of darkness you would know it was Molly Maguire herself, staring at you, maybe even ready to strike you down. Can you imagine? Red petticoats on a woman my age. Oh, my. Well, our uniform is a good thing to have. It's useful, even if it means wearing the same thing day after day. People will see it, even at a distance, and know who's coming to meet them, for better or for worse. No one but her boys ever saw Molly Maguire in the flesh. No policeman ever took her into custody. No judge ever tried her. No jail ever held her. No hangman ever led her to the gallows. Maybe she was a living woman. Maybe she wasn't. But real or not, in those bitter days, Molly Maguire was the most dangerous woman in Ireland. Ha! Oh, Ireland. I started out life in Ireland as Mary Harris. I was born in Cork, the rebel city. Oh, my first job. After I moved to Toronto when I was 14 with my family, I left Toronto and I got my first job at St. Mary's School in Monroe, Michigan. That's right. St. Mary's. Can you believe it? Mother Jones, who can cuss a blue streak, tell off-color jokes with the best of them, and drink the toughest miner under the table, started out teaching at a convent school. Well, as you can imagine, that job didn't last long. You've never heard of Monroe, have you? Oh, there's a good reason for that. Neither has anyone else, now or back then. But everyone had heard about Memphis, the biggest town on the Mississippi River between Minneapolis and the Gulf of Mexico. Railroads hauled cotton from hundreds of miles on either side of the river, straight into Memphis, and on the docks, black stevedores loaded white bales onto barges that floated down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, and from there shipped out to cotton mills all over the South and all over the world. With all that river and railroad trade, Memphis was one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and they needed school teachers, and they were willing to pay more than a pittance. So I left Monroe and I went to Memphis. Oh, it was a sight to behold. But the plantation owners and the railroad barons and the bootleggers and their pet politicians, oh, they ran Memphis like it was their own candy store. How many times have you seen a candidate for election coming toward you, smile as wide as the Mississippi River, right arm outstretched so far it's a wonder it doesn't dislocate his shoulder? Now in Memphis, whenever a man running for office offered you his hand, it was always palm up so that you could put something respectable in it. And then he would close his fingers down over whatever you put in there so it didn't blow away in the high wind from the river. Every member of the Tennessee legislature owed the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. You better believe the whiskey barons and the railroad bosses made sure those debts were paid before the next election rolled around. If living was a thing that money could buy, the rich would live and the poor would die. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Let the rich man live and the poor man bust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Are you loyal to the Constitution? Are you looking for a contribution? Here's a little present from the boys in the back, from the river of whiskey and the solid gold track. Let's have a hand for the boys in the back. Let's have a hand for the railroad track. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, with a whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Let the rich man live and the poor man bust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Are you praying for the resurrection? Are you running in the next election? Here's a little something you can use as you choose from the solid gold engine and the river of booze. A hand on your shoulder means you're one of us. A hand in your pocket means the railroad trust. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Let the rich man live and the poor man bust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Are you of a pure and lofty nature? Do you make a bundle from the legislature? Here's some provisions from the campaign trail, from the bottles of bourbon and the silvery rail. Pickles and glue and any old thing. Let's have a hand for the whiskey ring. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Let the rich man live and the poor man bust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. Let the rich man live and the poor man bust, with the whiskey ring and the railroad trust. I got to Memphis shortly before war broke out between the North and the South. I hadn't been there long when I met and married George Jones, a good Union man. And gave birth to 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. In 1867, the yellow fever epidemic that swept the South after the Civil War arrived on our doorstep. Have you ever seen anyone die of yellow fever? It's a terrible way to die. I watched not just 1, but 5. In less than 6 days, I lost all 4 of my children, my husband. All due to the rich men who owned and ran Memphis. Now, you might be asking, how could it be the rich who took your children and your husband away from you? But think about it. When the yellow fever epidemic swept into Memphis, who do you think died? Oh, not the rich, no. They were safe and sound, tucked away in their mansions high on the bluffs above the Mississippi River. But the poor people, the working people, we didn't have mansions to hide in. We lived in what everyone called the bottoms, the flat places along the banks of the Mississippi River that were sometimes half dry and sometimes half underwater. Living all crammed and cramped, piled on top of each other, 6, 10, 14 to a room. Nothing but polluted water to drink, human waste running down the sides of the streets, crowds everywhere and all the time. But the rich, in their mansions, no, they were smoking cigars and drinking champagne and talking about the trash down there in the bottoms. Oh, why don't these people even try to better themselves? Oh, no, they like living like that. It's all they've ever known. Honestly, if you give them a decent place to live, in half a month, they will have it looking like a cattle shed. Oh, they wouldn't move out of the bottoms if they could. They like being with their own kind. As if George and I wouldn't have moved out of the bottoms if we'd had a chance. But the rich owned the foundry where George worked. And even with the union, they barely paid him enough to put food on our table in those times. When not enough work came into the foundry, we didn't even get that. There were weeks where it was all we could do to scrape by. Now, if my George had been paid the smallest part of what his labor was worth, we might have been able to get out of the bottoms to someplace a little bit cleaner, a little bit safer, where drinking water came out of a faucet instead of the bucket, and human waste went into a sewer instead of the sides of the street. If George and I had been able to get out to higher ground, he and my children... I remember real hard times. A day's work wasn't worth a dime. You never got to eat your fill, but they never went hungry in the houses on the hill. Good and bad times came and went. Money earned was money spent. In my dreams I'm restless still, but they never get worried in the houses on the hill. Houses on the hill, your whitewashed fences look down on the town below. Your polished windows look down on company houses row on row. Just wanted you to know that if I could turn this world around, I'd see this place turned upside down. The bosses sweating in the mill, my kids living in the houses on the hill. But far better that I lost them than that they lost both me and George. To become orphans at so young an age, motherless children in a city that already had lost so many of its own. Even dead and buried, they had a mother to remember them. What did I have? In my heart, I was still a mother. I had heard my children laughing just days before the yellow fever swept them away from me. Oh, I can still hear their cries as they lay there in agony, too young to know what was happening to them. Crying, screaming, fevered, delirious, bleeding from every opening in their bodies, vomiting up black blood, crying out to me, "Mother, mother, mother, help me, please, please help me." And my last born, Mary, named for me, still too young for speech, begging me with her eyes to stop the pain, to please stop the pain. And my poor George, Mary, 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 mother, 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 mother. And the pain stopped. The cries, the convulsions, the delirium. There was nothing but silence from my husband, my children. Everything stopped. My heart, my breath, my home, my life. I ran. For the first and only time in my life, I ran. Away from Memphis, away from heartbreak, away from memory, back to what I had known before the yellow fever swept my children away from me, back to dressmaking. It was a trade that I had learned from my grandmother, not to teaching, not to a classroom, where day after day I would have to look into those faces and remember. I sewed dresses for the rich. Yes, I, Mother Jones, sewed dresses for the rich. I sat in their mansions on Chicago's Lakeshore Drive, staring out at Lake Michigan and the hundreds of tiny fires burning on the shores where the homeless men and women huddled around to keep from freezing to death. Oh, Mary, Mary, Mary. The mayor has invited our whole family to dinner at the mansion. Can you believe it? Oh, I simply must shine for my husband's sake. Only an alderman now, but who knows, in 10 years, my Edward, mayor of Chicago. Something in satin and silk, trimmed in velvet. Oh, and Mary, something for my wonderful daughter who turns 5 on Sunday. Something to make her even more beautiful than she already is. Ribbons and bows just everywhere, so she and I might shine together. Oh, Mary, I so wish you had children of your own. Morning has broken like ice on the lake. Out on the sidewalk, the children are passing far from their tenements, hungry and cold. Warm in this window, I stitch and sew, stitch and sew, stitch and sew. Fingers that ache and heart that is bleeding, stitch and sew, stitch and sew. Watching the children, I stitch and sew. Wind from the lake rises angry with snow. Out on the street where the jobless are standing, shaking and shivering, bitter and old. Safe in this mansion, I stitch and sew, stitch and sew, stitch and sew, driving the needle through layers of velvet, stitch and sew, stitch and sew. Eyes on the distance, I stitch and sew. Back in the drawing room, laughter rings out. There where the lords and the ladies are preening, satins and silks worked in patterns so fine. No word escapes me, I stitch and sew, stitch and sew, stitch and sew, pulling the cloth till the needles are breaking, stitch and sew, stitch and sew. Listening and learning, I stitch and sew. Far in the mountain where blood marks the coal, down in the shaft a fire is growing. Closer and closer it comes to our lives. Waiting for justice, I stitch and sew, stitch and sew, stitch and sew, pulling the thread till the silk is on fire. Fire, fire! There are flames everywhere. No, it's not the mine that's exploded. It's not the silk that's in flames. It's Chicago that's burning. The entire city is going up in smoke. My dying children's screams. No, it's living children's cries that pierce my ears, their panicked hearts pounding as they race toward the lake, toward safety. There is no safety ever anywhere for our kind, not this night, nor any other night. I stood in Lake Michigan for a night, a day, and a night, winter water up to my knees. Thousands of people crowding around me, shaking and shivering from the bitter cold, screaming and crying as the still white-hot embers, lifting, flying from the burning, dying city, fell, settling on our clothes, setting them on fire. Then it was morning, and the flames were gone. I walked the dead streets. 15,000 buildings gone to ashes. Nothing but memories, memories. My dressmaking shop, my bed, my chair, my dresser, my scissors, my measuring tapes, needles, pins, my life, nothing. 34 years old, and nothing. In the part of town where Chicago's poor and working people huddled together, all piled on top of each other, only a few buildings survived. One of them was the Knights of Labor Hall, scorched but still standing. Almost without knowing why, I went there. I stayed. I worked day after day with hundreds of people who had lost everything, who were so shocked they couldn't even speak. I learned to connect their pain to mine, how to sit silently until the agony that they had been beating down inside them broke through, and they would begin to talk, slowly at first. But then the words, the tears, the gasps tumbling out of them like the flames bursting from the windows of their burning tenements. It took me a little while to learn how to talk to people who are hurting, who are in need. Oh, it's different than when you're having a conversation with a friend over the back fence. You don't even have to think about what you're going to say next. It just rolls and rises like the smoke off the foundry. But when there's a goal to your conversation, you need to accomplish something, and you know what that is. You need to think about every sentence, every word, before you even say it. Now suppose I'm sitting down to talk with some Irish coal miner up in a coal camp near Carbondale, up in Pennsylvania. That's where a lot of the Irish ended up. Now my goal is to get him to walk out on strike, but that's not where I start. Hey, what county are you from then? I say. County Clare, says he. Now you know that I am from County Cork, but I'm not going to tell him that. Instead, I break into a big smile and I say, Ireland. Ah, well, it's a grand country though, isn't it? If it wasn't for the hard times there, oh, and here. Now he and I are from the same place, wherever that place might happen to be. You know, you and I might be second cousins once removed for all we know. Now I let him think about what I've just said. And when I sense that he's ready to go on, I say, you know, I've had some cousins that needed to be removed. In a couple of hard cases, removing them once wasn't enough. We had to do it all over again a second time. and he'll laugh. And for a few minutes, he will forget his fear of the bosses and the gun thugs, just long enough to listen to me and maybe even answer back. Now, maybe he will walk out and join the strike. Maybe he won't. But he's listened. He'll remember what I said. That is how you talk when you're organizing the working class. Oh, you never lie. Because if you do, one day that lie will creep up from behind and bite you in a heartbeat. When you're working with desperate people, the truth has to stay close to the ground. It has to be cut and sewed to fit the person. Just like when I was stitching ball gowns for those rich ladies in Chicago's Lakeshore and finery for their husbands. Oh, it never would have done to sew one of those captains of industry a working man's suit of clothes like I buried my poor George in. It was my memories of George that took me back, time and again, to the nights of Labor Hall, even when I wasn't needed, to help. I would sit with my eyes closed and listen to all the very best speakers, trying to learn and understand how they could grab the attention of every woman and man in the room, and they would hold on to it until they decided to let it go. But my favorite part of the meetings was the singing. The honest, upraised voices of working people always give me heart and hope. Blessed are the weak, blessed are the poor, blessed those who love their neighbor. Blessed are the children, blessed are the meek, blessed are all those who labor. Lift up your eyes, lift up your voice, come to the great reunion. Give us your hand, join in our band. You are the you in union. Scattered and tossed, battered and lost, all of these years divided. Each one is precious, each plays a part. When we are all united, sing it with us. Lift up your eyes, lift up your voice, come to the great reunion. Give us your hand, join in our band. You are the you in union. For from our birth, promise this earth, let us unite and share it. Seeking for justice here in this world, we shall one day inherit. Lift up your eyes, lift up your voice, come to the great reunion. Give us your hand, join in our band. You are the you in union. I sat there in my hard wooden chair, my eyes closed and my heart open to my bitter memories. And suddenly it was no longer 1871 Chicago or the Knights of Labor Hall, but the year was 1861 Memphis, and the hall belonged to the local 66 of the International Iron Molders Union. Oh, it was the largest union in the country in those days. I didn't know anything about unions back then, beyond the occasional conversation I had overheard when those parlors of those rich men where I sat stitching ballroom gowns for their daughters and their wives. They talked scornfully about how terrible the unions were, how un-American. They shouted that the unions were destroying this country and making life impossible for the honest businessman. Honest? Well, I didn't go to my first union meeting out of solidarity either, no. Well, I was still Mary Harris, A school teacher, 24 years old, a Catholic girl from County Cork, Ireland. Unions didn't mean anything to me. No. I went to the meeting because I knew that afterwards there would be a dance. Oh, and listen, I'd only been in Memphis a short time, and I knew hardly anyone in the city, and I wanted to meet someone. You wipe that smile off your face, or I will wipe it off for you. All right, I admit it. I didn't want to meet someone. I wanted to meet a man. Well, I'd never been with a man, and I thought it was damn well time. Oh, it was different for women back then, and even more for those from Ireland, and most of all for women with mothers like mine. Oh. Our neighbors in Cork would occasionally leave church. No, they would leave home to go to church. My mother would occasionally leave church to come home. Most immigrants, when they came to this country, arrived just with the clothes on their back, but my mother, along with her 2 threadbare dresses, packed enough religious fervor to keep a medium-sized monastery warm in winter. She was as strict as she was pious. She saw how men would look at me when I was just 12 years old, not straight ahead, mind, but from head to ankle and back up again, oh, slowly. She saw how they would follow me with their eyes, and as I passed by, they would look at each other and whistle, and they'd grin, and they'd rub their thighs. Oh. She guarded me like an eagle guards its young. Wherever I went, in Toronto, herself or one of my brothers had to go with me. When I was finally allowed to leave home, it was to work at that convent school where the nuns looked over me even more than my mother ever did. But now, here I am in Memphis, alone, on my own, staring at this handsome young man striding across the small Union Hall stage, exciting the crowd with his eloquence and passion. Oh, I was getting a little excited myself in more ways than one. Even as his eyes would sweep the room, I could swear he was looking straight at me. Oh, and he was too, he told me later. He would shift his gaze, not to look at my eyes, but to look at my hands to see if I was wearing a wedding ring. He finished his speech to cheers and applause, and then he held up his hand for silence, and he said, "And now, let's dance." And as the crowd cleared the chairs back to the walls, he walked straight over to where I was sitting, stood there in his stained, soiled workman's clothes. He took my hand and kissed it. And in a voice that smelled of Ireland, he said, "May I have this dance?" In that instant, I knew what I was going to do, and that my sainted mother would never know. My mother's life led from the house to the church, to pray and to raise up a family. But here in this country I work on my own, for I had left Ireland behind me, for I had left Ireland behind me. One night after work at the Union Hall dance, I noticed a man from the foundry, a fiery young rebel no priest would approve. But I had left Ireland behind me. Yes, I had left Ireland behind me. He turned in his seat and he gave me a glance. He said, "Sure, Mary Harris, you'll give us a dance." I looked at him once, and I never looked back as we waltzed away down the river. Through that long night, I never once thought of the mother who raised me so gently, for the heat of the foundry burned deep in his eyes. And I had left Ireland behind me. Yes, I had left Ireland behind me. Jones. George Jones, the fiery young rebel that swept me off my feet, onto the dance floor and into another life. George Jones, the man who became my first lover, my husband, and father to my 4 lost children. George was a foundry worker at the Union Ironworks and Machine Shop in Memphis. Union indeed. Well, there was a union at the foundry, and George was a member, and a strong one at that. Well, foundry work is as dangerous as any trade can be. But every member of the working class lives with daily danger. The tree that falls too fast in the wrong direction, the crane cable that snaps suddenly, the molten iron that spills out of the ladle and into your boot, the twister in the cotton mill that grabs you by the hair and pulls you into the machine and the skin from your scalp. Oh, I love every member of the working class. But it was the coal miners, their wives and their children, that claimed a special hold on my heart. My boys, I called them. You see, I no longer have children of my own. But now I have not just 4, but 400,000 children. For every coal miner that's ever lived is a child of mine. My boys. Oh, and they have a name for me, too. They called me Mother. Well, them and everyone else, even Warren G. Harding, President of the United States, called me Mother. But the newspapers, when they were writing articles about me, they would call me Mother Jones. But to my face, every last mill and cannery worker, every coal miner, every sheriff, every judge, even every prosecuting attorney called me Mother. And I called the miners my boys, whether it was in a secret meeting at the head of a holler in some coal camp where you have to wade 10 miles up a creek just to get there. I hide with them in some shotgun shack that the coal company calls a house, matching them drink for drink, using language that would make a priest cover his ears, telling dirty stories that make my boys double over with laughter. Oh, I'm out with them on a picket line, where the gun thugs are swinging their high-powered rifles just itching for a chance to shoot. Or I'm in the depths of a mine, where I'm sneaking in to organize the men below. Oh, I sit right there alongside them in one of those little rooms that they've carved out of the coal on the side of the main tunnel. I sit right there with the light from their carbide lamps glinting off their blackened faces, and I say to them, boys, God damn it to hell, you've got to do what Mother tells you to do, or I'm gonna rip the balls off your body with my bare hands. Yes, Mother, they say. Even though I'm talking to them in ways that no mother ever did or ever will. Oh, I can't battle with my fists, but I sure can fight with words. Strong words. Harsh words sometimes, hard words when that's what's needed. Cowards, I call them. Weak, lily-livered goddamn cowards when they won't do, right? Lower than a snake crawling on its belly. Oh, now you know that a man can't stand to be talked to like that. If it was another man who said those words, it wouldn't be fighting words. They would be killing words. They'd be go for your knife, your pistol, your minder's pick, whatever weapon happens to be closest to hand words. Then they'd be, only one of us is going to walk out of here alive words. But when your mother talks to you like that, what are you going to do? People don't take kindly to men who kill their mothers. Is some miner whose pride I've wounded by telling him the truth about his own cowardice, going to order me to take it outside so we can settle it with our fists? How would that look? A 40-year-old minor pummeling his 70-year-old mother. You think his friends are going to stand around and cheer him on? Hit her again! Hit her again! No, they're not going to do anything like that. He's going to drop his eyes to the ground, he's going to put his arms at his side, and he is going to say, yes, mother, because he knows that if he doesn't do what I tell him to do, I'm going to shame him till kingdom come. I bet your mother never talked to you like that, did she? No, but if she did, you would do what she told you to do, wouldn't she? Huh? Of course you would. Ha, good lad. Oh. The women of the coal camps, the mothers, the wives, they lived in their own special hell. Every day that they would pack the dinner pails for their husbands, their brothers, and wave them off down the road to the mine, their hearts grew tight with fear. All the long shift, they listen for the shriek of the mine whistle, the scream of the explosion. They watch for the cloud of dust and fire bursting from the mine mouth, rising over the drowsy camp. Startled from sleep, they grab their babies and race headlong down the road, meeting together with handfuls, dozens, hundreds of other women, all choking down the nausea, tearing at their inside, the bile rising in their throat, all thinking the same thoughts silently. Am I a widow now? At 27, the only support for 6 young children. Where will I go 3 days from now when the coal company turns me out? Because company houses are only for those who work in the mines and their families. Worn and ragged from birthing all these children, will I ever find another man? Every day, every night, they watch, they wait, they listen, while their rage smolders inside them like those mine fires up near Carbondale that have burned underground for 100 years. I took the rage that lives in the heart of every working class woman and I built an army out of it. I became commanding general of a fiery mop and broom brigade of women with rage in our hearts and fire in our bellies, town after town. I led my troops into combat. Have you ever seen 2,000 women racing straight at you, bent on battle? Faces fierce, voices violent, hair shuddering in the wind as they race down the road to the mine mouth, brandishing brooms? Knuckles white, hands tight on the handles of their murderous mops. Oh, who wouldn't break and run in the face of such an avenging army? A strikebreaker tries to sneak past our line. A hickory handle, 2 inches thick, hits the back of his head. He hits the ground like a slab of slate. If he ever gets up, he'll think twice before he scabs again. Sometimes my mop and broom armies drag scabs out of the mines, black and white strikebreakers shipped in by the coal companies from hundreds of miles away. Sometimes it was their own husbands, their own brothers, who were too afraid to walk out on strike with the rest of my boys. Oh, now my mop and broom army, they turned the tables on them. Now the men were afraid if they didn't walk out on strike with the rest of my boys, their own grandmother might march right in there and drag them out by the hair, the feet, the crotch of the pants, whatever body part happened to be closest to grab first. So out the men came, of their own free will, of course. Now, if George Washington had had an army of women, the Revolutionary War would have been over before it started. The redcoats would have dumped themselves into Boston Harbor like so much tea, so terrified they wouldn't stop swimming until they washed up on the English shore at King George's feet. Now, sometimes we did run into more firepower than we could handle. In one Pennsylvania town, The sheriff overran our positions, took us prisoners of war, confiscated our mops and our brooms, made us stack them just like they were rifles, marched us straight from the field of battle to jail. Didn't even stop at the courthouse. Now, some of those women had babies with them, too small to leave at home, so those babies got locked up along with us. Well, now they may have confiscated our brooms and our mops, but they hadn't taken away all our weapons. Standing on the picket line, hooting at the scabs, sheriff said he'd teach us right from wrong. $30, 30 days, that judge, he wrote us down. Sitting in that narrow cell, we sang the whole night long. Jail can't hold my body down. Chains can't turn my soul around. I'm singing through the bars, flying free among the moon and stars. Jail can't hold my body down. Locked up in that prison with our children by our sides, we sang just like cats let loose in hell. Slept all day, sang all night, that judge just lay awake. Sent down for the sheriff and he opened up that cell. Jail can't hold my body down. Chains can't turn my soul around. I'm singing through the bars, flying free among the moon and stars. Jail can't hold my body down. Have you known the freedom of voices joined together? Have you felt the power in that sound? While there is a soul in prison, we shall not be free. While there is a song in prison, we shall not be bound. Jail can't hold my body down. Chains can't turn my soul around. I'm singing through the bars, flying free among the moon and stars. Jail can't hold my body down. I suppose it was my being a commanding general of a women's mop and broom army that made a West Virginia prosecutor call me the most dangerous woman in America. I do appreciate the honor. I worked hard for it. Molly Maguire might have been the most dangerous woman in Ireland during her time, but Mother Jones was damn sure the most dangerous woman in the United States of America. But, you know, the prosecutor who called me that couldn't begin to understand the reality. It's all women who are dangerous, not just any one woman, no matter how radical or outspoken she may be. When women are organized together, we become more powerful than a keg of dynamite with a 6-inch fuse. We become truly explosive. Most men think that women's place is in the home, or forced to work in some filthy laundry with the boss putting his hand up her dress, threatening to fire her if he can't have his way with her. What could be more cowardly? But those men think that they're the ones with courage. Oh. Well, I will tell you one thing about the women of the working class. We're tougher than the men. We don't give a good goddamn who knows it. Oh, most men can be brave under fire. I'll grant them that. I saw that at the Battle of Blair Mountain, where for 3 days, 10,000 armed miners shot it out with an army of gun thugs paid for by the coal operators. But most men only show courage when other men are watching, when they're afraid that they might be shamed in front of their comrades. You know, if shame were to disappear from the world overnight, a lot of men's so-called courage would just evaporate right along with it. Well, as much as I love my mop and broom brigades, as much as I loved my boys. It were the children that were my passion. Well, they broke my heart. I don't need to tell you why. The tragedy of these children's lives would move any stones, unless those stones happen to be the hearts of the filthy rich men who owned not just the mines, but the mills. Young girls, 6 years old, would go to work in the mills as mothers' helpers, working 12, 14 hours a day. No school this morning, the whistle's blowing. Children by 2s and 3s tumble down the hill, out of their childhood into the world for good, out of the schoolyard into the mills. Silk and satin, no time for dreaming. The dawn is breaking, the 12-hour shift starts soon. Ribbon and lace, go take your place within the shadows of this spinning room. Dressed in her mother's shirt, too small to reach her work, worn as the wooden box on which she stands. Torn from her books and games, she stares at her spinning frame. The threads of childish laughter break in her hands. Silk and satin, no time for dreaming. The dawn is breaking, 12-hour shift starts soon. Ribbon and lace, go take your place within the shadows of this spinning room. Seasons don't shift in here, fog doesn't lift in here, snow doesn't drift in here when the nights turn cold. Wind doesn't blow in here, rivers don't flow in here, children don't grow in here, they just get old. I couldn't let those children suffer like that. So when 100,000 silk mill workers in eastern Pennsylvania went out on strike, 17,000 of them children, I decided to organize a children's crusade to let the nation know about the shame of child labor. I made plans to lead 200 children from Philadelphia to Sagamore Hill, Teddy Roosevelt's summer home on Oyster Bay, Long Island. At each of the small towns along the way, we get the local unions to arrange for food to eat and places to sleep. And then at each stopping place, we would gather the biggest crowds we could and agitate them with fiery speeches. And then we'd get those little children who, with the missing fingers and the missing limbs, to pass the hat amongst the crowd to raise money to support the strike. Oh, I knew from the start that Roosevelt wouldn't be home. Oh, think about it. If you knew that Mother Jones, along with 200 children, most of them terribly maimed, was planning to stop by your house on a Sunday afternoon for tea, along with dozens of reporters, would you be crazy enough to stay home? No. You'd take the first limousine out of town. But here's what you need to understand. It wasn't important for the children to meet President Roosevelt. What mattered was for the nation to see the children. If I had really wanted the children to meet the president, I simply would have called his secretary and made an appointment. I would have taken the children from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. by train. We would have spent 15 minutes at the White House sipping tea with Teddy, and we would have all been home by supper time. Why didn't I take 100 men and women, fully grown, instead of so many children? Well, God knows, I could have found 10,000 workers in the coal camps and the mill villages with crushed or missing limbs or other injuries too terrible to mention. But a woman with a missing hand, a man with an amputated leg, gets no sympathy. The better class of people just look at her missing hand and they say, oh, well, she should have been more careful. A man with a missing leg? Yeah, drunk on the job. I mean, what do you expect from that class of people? You know, lose a limb or a hand? I mean, you know what those people are like. Those people? Those Irish? Those Hungarians? Those Italians? Those Jewish? Those Polish? Oh, yeah, but what those rich people really said was those Micks, those Dagos, those Hunkies, those Kikes, those Polacks, the class anger of the rich. But a girl of 10, blinded when a shuttle flew off the spinning frame. A mill girl of 8 with a missing leg. A breaker boy of 12 with no fingers. Oh, let's see, you harden your hearts now, you upper-class sons of bitches. The president has a summer home, a mansion made of brick and stone that's built upon the broken bones of the children of this land. While the president's at play, frolicking on Oyster Bay, these children work 12 hours a day, risking thumbs and hands. See where the children come, playing on the fife and drum. Battles are lost and won on the road to Oyster Bay. Long may our land be bright, with freedom's holy light. Where will they sleep tonight on the children's crusade? When children go to work, not school, and babies learn to spin and spool, then gold has bought the golden rule, and justice is a shill. Who will raise a voice or hand to save this stooped and shivering band from greed that hangs upon the land like smoke above the mill? Children all stooped and bowed, too scared to laugh out loud. Where is your freedom now on the road to Oyster Bay? My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. What good is that to me on the children's crusade? And you who own these dungeon mills and trade in childhood, buy and sell, and make of work a living hell where children smolder still. If by chance there still remains some human blood within your veins, then hear the cry, break the chains of the children of the mill. Land of the boss's pride, where children worked and died, we will not be denied on the road to Oyster Bay. Freedom will ring again, children will sing again. Justice is at the end of the children's crusade. The children's crusade, the children's crusade. It failed. Of course, I had to pretend it was a grand success. I gave speeches all over the country about the Children's Crusade to cheers and standing ovations, but nothing changed. The strike was broken. The children of the silk mills went back to work. But the women and children of the coal camps and the mill villages, they never forgot Mother Jones. Oh, I fought for them. I stood by them when no one else would. They'll remember me for the rest of their lives. They will, won't they? Well, for every working class woman who would follow me anywhere, there was a rich upper class woman who hated me. Well, that was no surprise. Most of them were rich because they married into money. And where do you think that money came from? Oh, no, not the mines and the mills their husbands owned. Their wealth came from the blood and sweat from the laborers who worked in those hellholes. Oh, upper class. Class enemy, more like it. Oh, these women, they were as pampered as the poodles whose collars they decked in precious gemstones, glittering sapphires and diamonds that would have kept 100 coal camp families fed and sheltered for the rest of their lives. God only knows why they asked me to speak with them, but they did. They even held a special dinner in my honor at a fancy hotel ballroom in New York City. 500 society women, all waiting to hear Mother Jones. The evening started out pleasantly enough. I have good manners. My mother raised me with the manners that any Catholic girl should have. I know how to use them when I want to. I told the assembled throng about the breaker boys, the trapper boys, the mill girls, the young women forced into prostitution to help feed their families, the children's crusade. I could see tears rolling down their cheeks, glistening in their eyes and dropping on their silken blouses. When I finished speaking, they sprang to their feet, cheering and clapping so loudly I was sure the chandelier was going to crash down on all of us like a slate fall from the mine. Well, the chairwoman finally got all 500 of them to sit and quiet down. And then she asked for questions. The first woman who stood up asked, Mother Jones, where do you stand on the question of women's suffrage? That's when all hell broke loose. I have known women who scrubbed on their hands and their knees, cleaning the floors in the mansions where riches are born. I have known women who sewed till their fingers were bleeding, stitching the gowns for the dances where power is worn. I have known women who slaved all their lives, asking no more than the chance to survive. Will their pain be less now when we have votes for the women? Will their work be easier when we have suffrage at last? Upper-class ladies, all necklaced and jeweled, well-chosen words and manners so fine. Who will they vote for, the proud union miner, or their husband's good friend who invests in the mine? I have known women whose bodies were broken by violence. There in the laundry, the factory, the home, and the mill. I have known women who suffered their lives out in silence. Who will speak out for them? Who will stand up with them still? I have known women who stood by their men, only to lose them again and again. Will their pain be less now because we have votes for the women? Will their bodies be healed by the men who take office next time? Elegant ladies with poodles and furs, springtime in France, summer in Spain. Who are they friend to, the working class woman or the owner whose leather glove fist holds the chain? I have known women who slept on the floor on a blanket, giving their bed up so I could have rest for the night. I have known women who marched against high-powered rifles, stared down the barrel, dared them to fire and fight. I have known women whose courage and anger gave them a moment of honor and pride. Will they give up allegiance to class that sustained them? Their faith in the strike and each other that held back the pain. For a small piece of paper without even one woman on it. For a thin paper ballot that won't even mention their name. Let me set the record straight. I have never been against the vote for women when there was someone or something worth voting for. I have worked for progressive candidates. I have encouraged other women to work with them. Yes, working class women need to vote, but they need to vote with their voices, their feet, their fists. A mop and broom at the mine mouth, a strike of 1,000 women for union recognition speaks more loudly and gets more done than a piece of paper in a ballot box. If these wealthy women do get the vote, who do you think they're going to vote for? If John D. Rockefeller decides to run for president against Eugene Debs, who do you think Teddy Roosevelt's mother is going to vote for? No, give me industrial democracy, the organized power of the working class, not the false democracy of the ballot box. I've been on the road for 50 years. Colorado, California, Arizona, Oregon, Michigan, Mexico, Minnesota, New York, Illinois, Wisconsin, Texas, British Columbia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Oklahoma. I've organized coal, copper, and iron miners, machinists and mill workers, shirtwaist and garment makers, brewers, smelters, and shipyard hands. Every one of my class. But I always went back to West Virginia and my boys. In the end, they turned against me. It was just after Sheriff Sid Hatfield, a member of the Miners' Union, was ambushed and murdered on the courthouse steps by the Baldwin Felts guards. That was the last straw for my boys. Thousands of them took up their rifles and headed straight into Mingo County. The governor of West Virginia was a friend of mine, and he told me privately that my boys were marching into a death trap set for them by the coal operators. I couldn't let that happen. So I talked to my boys. I told them they had to turn back. I even read them a telegram that I had received from President Harding saying that if they put down their rifles and went home, he would get the gunmen out of West Virginia. The union leaders demanded to see the telegram. I refused to show it to them. If men can't trust their mother, who can they trust? They called the White House. They found out the truth. There was a telegram, but the president didn't write it. I sent it myself. That's why I couldn't show it to them. My boys marched straight past me on to the Battle of Blair Mountain. They said I'd gone soft, that the governor had sweet-talked me into betraying my class. Traitor, they whispered under their breath as they marched by with their eyes turned away. But I had to do what I did. The governor had taken me into his confidence. He wasn't using me like the miners said. He was simply trying to keep the peace. He was trying to keep my boys from being slaughtered. I had to work with him. What good is a mother if she can't keep her children from dying? When they found out that my boys had turned against me, my longtime enemies turned their sights on me, and they came after me with a vengeance. You see, the rich men who own and run this country, they had seen to the defeat of Germany. Now they turned to destroying what they called the enemy within. The unions, the radicals. They sent federal troops to break strikes. They broke the back of radicalism, and too many of our best with it. Oh, if you were Eugene Debs and you were born here, they just arrested you for sedition and threw you in jail. If you were Emma Goldman, an immigrant, they just deported you. Oh, God. Now the so-called labor leaders, they saw the writing on the wall, and they decided that they needed to have their bread buttered on the other side. So now, instead of railing at the rich capitalists, they sat down to dinner with them at private clubs around mahogany tables. A labor peace, they called it, when it was a peace of surrender, not a peace of victory. It was a peace without justice. There are men of power riding in their private Pullman cars with their watch chains and their diamonds, their port wine and cigars. But the curtains on their coaches are like blinders on their eyes. They never hear the suffering, they never hear the cries. These men who own the sweatshops, dressed in their Sunday finery, sit dining with their mothers, all wrapped in furs and courtesy, attentive to each whim and wish until, silk hat in hand, they bow upon the parting step. How good to see you, mother. Every single worker is to a woman born. The mothers are esteemed and praised, the children used and scorned. How can workers be exploited while their mothers are acclaimed? If motherhood is sacred, why are our children murdered, broken, maimed? And what now of this woman with no children she can claim, who will never hear an answer, though she calls them each by name? Her eyes grow bright with anger, her tongue is sharp with age, her heart swells up with loneliness, her blood runs hot with rage. There are coffins in the cutting room, shrouds upon the wooden stairs. There are marks on the machinery that are not the tracks of sweat or tears, but the blood of broken workers crying out for mercy. Each the child of a mother, each the victim of the factory. Let me cut them to the marrow. Let me weight them down with stones. Let me creep into their slumber. Let me chill them to the bone. As a worker, next to nothing. As a mother, nearly all. I drew the mystery of motherhood around me like a sword, a shield, a shawl. I draw the sanctity of motherhood around me like a sword, a shield, a shawl. It's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. I suppose we better call it a night. I know we're in heaven, but I haven't been here long enough to know if it's safe to walk these goddamn golden streets after midnight. You never know, 1 or 2 of them son of a bitch West Virginia gun thugs might be out there looking for me right now. They might have slipped in while St. Peter was on his lunch break. I'm glad you're here. You and the other people like you. You're the future. I'm the past. Me and the other labor leaders that I knew back down on Earth, oh, they're as old as I am. And besides, they think they know everything they need to know, that there's nothing more to learn. And they stopped listening to Mother Jones a long time ago. But you're listening. I have been a radical for 50 years and more. Stood against the rich and greedy, for the workers and the poor. From Canada to Mexico, I traveled everywhere. Wherever trouble called me, I was there. Like stitches in a crazy quilt that women piece and sew. Wherever there was suffering, I was bound to go. With angry words for cowardice, comfort for despair. Wherever help was needed, I was there. I was there in the Depression, when times were at their worst. But we had them where we wanted, like a dam about to burst. With fire in our bellies and revolution in the air. For a moment we saw clearly I was there. Sometimes I saw the issues in quite a different light. And old friends turned against me, but I never left the fight. When stones were in my pathway and my road was far from clear, whether I chose right or wrongly, I was there. On a day when hope goes hungry and your dreams seem bound to fall, you may see me at the mill or just outside the Union Hall. When the clouds are empty promises and the sky a dark despair, like an eagle from the mountain, I'll be there. And you, my brave young comrades, when the future sounds the call, will you be there for the battle? Will you answer one and all? When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll's called anywhere, will you stand and answer proudly, we're still here? Can you stand and answer proudly, I was there? Oh, I really must be going home. George and the children, they're waiting for me. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such an honor. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And I can't wait to hear your responses. Do reach out and let us know. Thanks a million. And thanks for supporting Caffè Lena in this time of need. And thanks for supporting all artists. And thanks for standing up for what you believe in. We need it even more today.